In a quiet suburban neighborhood, a young black teenager kept a low profile, trying to adjust to his new high school. He faced ridicule, ignored by teachers, and became the target of jokes from three other students. What no one realized was that he was a seasoned Taekwondo champion. When his patience finally snapped, a confrontation erupted, one that sent shockwaves through the entire school. The bullies found themselves dealing with the consequences they had long deserved. Before we jump in, let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. At 6:12 a.m., Jaden Carter stood in front of the small bathroom mirror in his family's apartment, watching his own reflection with quiet uncertainty. The cracked tiles behind him told the story of a place that had seen better days, and the weak bathroom light flickered, casting his face in and out of shadow. He ran a damp hand over his short, tight curls, trying to make them lie flat, but they bounced back up with a mind of their own. His polo shirt, forest green, with the Lakers' high crest stitched at the chest, felt stiff against his skin. A size too big, it hung awkwardly over his lean frame. His khaki pants creased awkwardly around his knees. Everything about him felt off, like the outfit was a costume, and he was just hoping it might convince people he belonged. His glasses slipped down his nose again. He pushed them back up, looked himself in the eye, took a breath. "Just stay quiet," he murmured, barely louder than a thought. "Keep your head down." He said it the way someone repeats an old prayer, not because they believe it will work, but because they don't know what else to do. From the kitchen, he could hear the low hum of the radio playing the morning gospel hour, as it did every day. His mother kept it on while making breakfast, even if she was too tired to sing along anymore. That morning, though, there was no breakfast. She'd worked an overnight shift at St. Mary's Medical Center and had come home just as Jaden was getting ready to leave. Her uniform still smelled faintly of antiseptic and weariness. She kissed the top of his head and whispered, "Don't try to be a hero today, baby. Just do what you need to do. Fit in if you can." He had nodded, he always did, but her words settled heavily on his shoulders. A reminder not to stand out, not here. Just 2 weeks ago, they'd lived in Atlanta, where the rhythm of life was familiar and Jaden had space to be himself, where most people looked like him, spoke like him, and knew not to mispronounce his name, where his uncle, Marcus Carter, a retired Army instructor and lifelong martial artist, had trained him daily in a modest gym behind an old laundromat. Jaden had spent years on the mat, learning discipline. His mother had called it a new beginning, a better school, a safer neighborhood, a better job, a fresh start. She had smiled when she said it, but Jaden saw the tension in her eyes, the fear that something might go wrong, that something might follow them from the old life to the new. Lakehurst, Colorado, didn't feel like a new beginning. It felt like being dropped into someone else's story mid-sentence. Their new apartment was small but clean, tucked into the corner of a complex where the neighbors stared a little too long. The school was bigger than his old one, with spotless floors and banners that said things like character, pride, tradition. But the smiles from the staff felt paper thin, and the students either ignored him or studied him with quiet judgment. He had counted fewer than 10 black students in total during his first visit to the campus. That morning, walking to the bus stop with the cold mountain air stinging his face, Jaden told himself again that it didn't matter. He just had to make it through. No trouble, no questions, no fights. His mother had made him promise not to join any sports, not even wrestling. "No extra attention," she had said. "No reason for them to think you're a threat." So he'd nodded. Again, he wouldn't wear the shirts that showed his build, wouldn't talk about his training, wouldn't mention the years he'd spent practicing Taekwondo with the intensity of an Olympic hopeful, wouldn't say a word about the title match he missed to make the move. Because here, at Lakehurst High, Jaden Carter was just the new kid. And that's all anyone needed to know, for now. The first day at Lakehurst High passed in a blur of hallways that all looked the same. Classrooms that smelled like old whiteboards and industrial-strength disinfectant, and students who barely looked in his direction, unless they were looking too long. Jaden had memorized his schedule, walked with purpose, and kept his eyes low. It wasn't fear, he told himself that over and over. It was strategy. He'd been taught to assess, To observe, don't make the first move. Never show too much too soon. But even the best plans had cracks. It started in third period biology when the teacher misread his name during roll call. Jaden? And half the class giggled. He corrected her softly. It's Jaden. She didn't repeat it, just moved on. Then at lunch, he found an empty seat at the far corner of the cafeteria and unzipped the soft lunch pack his mom had left on the counter. Rice, grilled chicken, and sweet plantains. The food smelled like home, but in the loud cafeteria full of pizza slices, fries, and soda cans cracking open, it suddenly felt like a spotlight. He ate quickly, chewing without tasting, pretending not to hear the whispered laughs 2 tables over. By Wednesday, the whispers had turned into casual jabs, the kind said just loud enough for him to hear, but quiet enough to deny. One student asked if he was from Africa or somewhere, and another joked about whether he knew any rappers back home. Jaden didn't respond. He kept moving. He told himself it was just ignorance. He dealt with it. But on Friday, they remembered his name. It was in gym class when it happened. The students had been paired off for a flag football scrimmage. Jaden got stuck on the team with Jake Thompson. Jake was the type of kid who walked like he owned the place. 6 feet tall, captain of the baseball team, a smirk permanently etched into his face. His father, Officer Thompson, worked for the Asheville Police Department. Everyone knew that. Teachers smiled wider when Jake talked. Other kids moved out of his way in the hall. He hadn't said much to Jaden all week, just the occasional stare. But in gym class, as they huddled for the game, he looked over and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "So? What's your deal, Carter? You gonna run, or you just here to make us look diverse?" The boys around them laughed, some awkwardly, some eagerly. Jaden froze. Not because he was afraid, but because the old tension was back, tight in his chest, crawling up his spine. That split second between instinct and choice, the moment Uncle Marcus used to drill into him, what you feel is your body's weapon, what you choose to do with it, that's the real strength. Jaden said nothing. He jogged out to his position and played the game silently. He didn't ask for the ball, didn't shove back when someone clipped him during a play, but he moved well, fluid, precise, not flashy, but undeniably capable. Jake noticed. After class, in the locker room, Jake passed behind Jaden and slapped the back of his head. Not hard, but with that same casual dominance a lion might swat a cub with. "Light on your feet, huh?" Jake said, loud again. "You do ballet or something back in Atlanta?" The locker room roared. Jaden stood still, his fists clenched at his sides. He stared at the dented locker in front of him and breathed. Once, twice, 3 times. He didn't turn around. He didn't need to. The laughter faded when the coach walked in and Jake moved on like nothing had happened. But the message was clear. A target had been drawn. None of them knew what he could do. None of them knew the hours he'd spent on the mat, blood and sweat soaking into canvas. None of them had felt the speed of his kicks or the precision of his hands. They just saw a quiet black kid who didn't fight back, didn't talk back, didn't belong. Jaden didn't tell his mom. He was already stretched thin, working extra shifts, navigating a new hospital full of politics and unspoken rules. He saw it in the way her shoulders sagged when she thought he wasn't looking. He wouldn't add to her load. He wouldn't give her a reason to worry. So he endured. He ate alone, walked home alone, practiced footwork in his bedroom when the neighbors downstairs weren't home to bang on the ceiling. He trained in silence, his breath steady, his eyes focused. Not to fight back, at least not yet, but to remember, to remind himself of who he was beneath the new uniform, beneath the slurs, beneath the stillness. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after Jaden's first day at Lakehurst. The clouds had rolled in during third period and now cast a dull gray shadow over the entire school. Students moved sluggishly through the halls, trying to avoid puddles tracked in from outside. Jaden was at his locker, quietly organizing his books, when he heard footsteps behind him. Too many, too close. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Jake Thompson and his usual crew, Tyler, the enforcer with arms like tree trunks, and Max, the wiry kid who always had his phone out, ready to record whatever fun they had in mind. Jake leaned against the locker next to Jaden's, his tone casual but laced with mockery. Yo, glass boy, still breaking records for most words not spoken in a day? Jaden kept his eyes on the lock, his fingers steady. Still pretending you're not invisible? Jake continued. You know what I realized? No one even knows what you sound like. Kinda creepy, don't you think? Max chuckled, already pulling out his phone. We should get him on camera again. Maybe get him to say something this time. Hey, Jaden, do something cool for TikTok, will you? Jaden closed his locker slowly, turning, just enough to look Jake in the eye. There was no fear in his face, no shake in his hands, just a stillness that didn't match the moment. Not today, he said, voice low but clear. It was the first time he'd spoken to them directly. Jake blinked, taken slightly off guard, but only for a second. Not today, he repeated, stepping closer. So what, tomorrow, Saturday? What's your schedule like for getting punked? Before Jaden could answer, a voice cut through the tension. Is there a problem here? Emily Foster, small but sharp, stood a few feet away, arms crossed and eyes locked on Jake. She'd been in Jaden's English class and had always offered a polite nod in the hallway. But this was the first time she'd stepped in. Jake scoffed. Nah, just talking to our favorite audience of one. He turned to Max. Come on, this is boring now. As they walked away, Tyler shoved Jaden lightly on the shoulder, just enough to make a point. Jaden didn't move. Emily waited until they were gone, then stepped closer. You okay, she asked. He gave her a small nod. They're always like that, she said. Used to mess with me too, until I stopped pretending it didn't matter. She paused. I seen the way you move. In gym, you're holding back. Jaden hesitated. Then I made a promise. Emily didn't ask what kind. She just nodded. Sometimes promises have to evolve. That night, Jaden didn't train in silence. He turned on music, low but present, and cleared more space in his room. He moved through his forms with precision, with purpose, not out of anger, not even out of pride, but because his body needed to remember not just the techniques, but the control, the breath, the choice. Uncle Marcus always said, you don't train to win fights. You train so you never have to. And now, for the first time in weeks, Jaden felt that truth settle back into his bones. The next day brought a strange calm. Jake and his crew avoided him in the halls, though whether out of boredom or calculation, Jaden couldn't tell. Emily sat next to him at lunch. They didn't say much, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was mutual, grounded, safe. She showed him a meme on her phone. He cracked a smile. Small but real. But peace at Lakehurst was always temporary. The following Monday, Mr. Stevens, their history teacher, announced a group project worth 30% of their semester grade. Names were drawn randomly. Jaden's heart sank when he heard it. Carter and Thompson. The class erupted into whispers. Jake turned in his seat and grinned. Guess I get to see if Glassboy knows how to read. After class, Jake leaned over his desk. My place. Tomorrow, after school. Jaden arrived at Jake's house at exactly 4 p.m. the next day, backpack slung over one shoulder, sneakers slightly muddy from the half-mile walk through wet sidewalks. The Thompson residence sat in a manicured cul-de-sac, all identical houses with neat lawns and American flags. Jake opened the door with a grin that was all teeth and no warmth. Right on time, he said, stepping aside. Didn't think you'd show. Jaden stepped in without a word, noting the polished hardwood floors, the smell of expensive candles, and a wall of family photos. Jake in a Little League uniform. Jake in a Boy Scout sash. Jake next to his father in a police dress uniform. The picture said legacy, expectation, entitlement. They settled at the long dining room table, textbooks and laptops spread out between them. For almost an hour, they worked in relative silence. Jake surprisingly seemed competent, sharp even when he wanted to be. They outlined their topic, split the research evenly, and agreed on slides. It was almost normal, until Jake's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, smirked, and stood up. They're here, he said. Jaden looked up, frowning. Who's they? But Jake was already walking to the door. Moments later, Tyler and Max strolled in, laughing about something that instantly died when they saw Jaden. Study session, huh? Max said, setting his backpack on a chair and pulling out his phone. Thought we'd make this a little more entertaining. Jake returned, his whole demeanor shifting, like a switch flipped the moment his audience arrived. Don't worry, glass boy. We're just adding some flavor. Make the most of your 15 minutes. Jaden stood slowly, his pulse quickened, but his breathing stayed steady. I'm leaving, he said, voice flat. Tyler stepped in front of him, grinning. Why so quick to go? We brought props. Max had already started filming. Don't be like that, Jake said, circling around to Jaden's other side. We just want a little demo. We heard you got moves. Thought maybe you'd give us a Jackie Chan moment. Jaden looked at the phone, looked at Jake, then looked at the distance between himself and the door. Too far to bolt without contact. He shifted his stance subtly, one foot slightly behind the other. Knees relaxed. His body remembered, but his mind repeated Uncle Marcus's voice. Your strength is your calm. I'm not doing this, Jaden said. Turn the phone off. Max snorted. Come on, man, just a little fun. We're not going to hurt you. Then without warning, Tyler shoved him. Nothing too hard, just enough to draw a reaction. Jaden stumbled backward into a chair, caught himself before falling, and stayed down, still, deliberately. The laughter began almost immediately. That's it, Jake mocked. That's what we were waiting for? Jaden didn't move, didn't speak. He let them record, let them laugh, let them think he was broken again. It wasn't fear holding him there. It was choice, strategy. Minutes later, he walked out of the house without another word, their jeers following him into the cooling dusk. The video went up that night. By morning, everyone had seen it. Blast Boy Part 2, the sequel no one asked for, but everyone watched. Hallways echoed with whispers. Someone mimicked his fall during passing period. Someone else left a cracked glass figurine on his desk during third period with a sticky note. Handle with care. Mr. Stevens pretended not to notice. But Emily noticed. At lunch, she sat across from him, jaw tight. They don't stop because no one makes them, she said. I've seen them do it to others too. And you? You're letting them decide who you are. Jaden looked up from his untouched lunch. I'm not done, he said quietly. That night he didn't train in silence. He trained with purpose. Push-ups until his arms trembled. Shadow sparring until sweat soaked through his shirt. He watched himself in the mirror, each movement crisp, precise, controlled. This wasn't anger. This was clarity. Focus. 3 days later, it all came to a head. School let out under a sharp blue sky, the air crisp with the kind of cold that hinted winter was only a week away. Students poured out of Lakehurst's front doors in waves, laughing, shouting, jostling backpacks and phones as they scattered toward the parking lot. Jaden walked with his usual quiet precision, earbuds in, hands deep in his hoodie pocket, backpack slung low. He had mapped every route, every timing. He knew exactly where to walk to avoid attention. But today the current shifted. Yo, glass boy! The voice rang out across the lot, loud and unmistakable. Jaden stopped, slowly pulling out one earbud. A small crowd had already begun to form, like sharks circling a drop of blood. Jake Thompson stood at the edge of the lot with Tyler and Max, a basketball tucked under one arm, his grin wide, performative, teeth bright in the sun. We've been thinking, Jake said, stepping closer. Maybe we judged you too soon. Maybe you're more athletic than we gave you credit for. So we thought we'd let you try something more. Your speed, a little American classic. Basketball. Think you can handle that? Jaden didn't answer. He studied Jake's stance, the way he held the ball, how his friends flanked him like practice guards. He noticed the crowd growing, a mix of curiosity and expectation. Students pulled out phones, whispers spread like static. Jaden recognized the rhythm. This wasn't about sports, it was a setup. Another show, one final attempt to humiliate him in front of the entire school. Jake bounced the ball once, hard. Here, he said, and hurled it straight at Jaden's chest. Jaden caught it clean, effortlessly, without flinching. His eyes never left Jake's. The ball dropped to the pavement with a dull echo. No thanks, he said, his voice calm but unwavering. The crowd shifted. Jake narrowed his eyes. What's with the attitude, huh? Starting to think you're better than everyone? Jaden didn't move. No, he replied. Just done letting you decide who I am. Jake stepped closer. You don't get to tell me what to do, glass boy. Jaden tilted his head slightly. I just did. Something in his tone cut through the noise, made the crowd fall still. Even Tyler hesitated. But Jake? He couldn't walk away. Not now. Not with so many eyes watching. His face flushed, his fists clenched, and before anyone could say a word, he lunged forward, grabbing Jaden's hoodie with one hand and swinging with the other. Time slowed. Jaden moved. With the grace of years of practice, he pivoted on the ball of his foot, redirecting Jake's momentum. One arm slid under Jake's extended strike, the other guiding his shoulder. It wasn't violent, it was efficient. Jake stumbled forward completely off balance and hit the asphalt hard with a loud, unceremonious thud. Gasps erupted around them. Phones were already recording. Jake groaned, sitting up in confusion, anger, and embarrassment. Don't do this, Jaden warned, stepping back into a ready stance. It was unmistakable now, not showy, not aggressive, but centered, balanced, professional. A fighter's stance. Jake scrambled up and rushed again, fists raised in messy rage. Jaden blocked the punch with one forearm, then struck Jake in the chest with a controlled palm strike, not enough to injure, but enough to knock the wind out of him and send him stumbling backward once more. I'm not here to fight, Jaden said, loud enough for everyone to hear, but I won't be your punching bag. Not anymore. Tyler cursed and lunged toward him, but Jaden sidestepped, swept his legs with a low kick, and sent him sprawling. Max froze, phone still in hand, the screen capturing every frame. Someone whispered, "Holy crap." Another voice from the crowd, "Did you see that?" Jake, wheezing, still on the ground, stared at Jaden in shock. Who the hell are you? He asked, breathless. Jaden looked at the crowd, then back at Jake. I'm Jaden Carter, two-time state Taekwondo champion, Atlanta Regionals finalist, and I've been holding back because I made a promise. The crowd murmured, phones buzzing with activity, faces stunned. Jaden stepped forward one last time, standing over Jake. Not in threat, but in clarity. You're going to leave me alone, he said evenly. You're going to stop posting your little videos, and you're going to think twice the next time you try to humiliate someone weaker than you? Because I'm not the only one who's done being quiet. He turned to the students still watching. That goes for all of you too. If you see it and say nothing, you're part of it. And with that, Jaden picked up his backpack, slung it over one shoulder, and walked away, leaving behind the silence of a crowd that had just seen strength they never expected. By the next morning, Lakehurst High felt different. Not in the way schools do after a snow day or a fire drill, but in the subtle shift of energy that happens when a hierarchy is disrupted. The video of Jaden's confrontation in the parking lot had spread like wildfire, not just through student phones, but whispered across every hallway, classroom, and locker row. But this time it wasn't mockery fueling the attention, it was shock. Students who had once laughed at Glassboy now watched him with wide eyes and uncertain silence. The same hands that once shoved or snickered now stayed firmly at their sides. No one tried to trip him, no one muttered beneath their breath. The air around Jaden was no longer hostile, it was charged, cautious. He wasn't feared the way a bully was feared, but respected, the way a lion is respected after it finally roars. The video hadn't just exposed Jake's failed attempt to humiliate Jaden, it had shattered the illusion that he and his crew were untouchable. Jake had been the symbol of unchallenged control at Lakehurst, and now the footage showed him being taken down, not with fists, but with flawless, controlled technique. The kind of power that didn't need to boast, that didn't lash out, but that refused to be disrespected any longer. Jake himself didn't show up for school that day. Rumors swirled. He was sick, he was suspended, his dad was livid, or he was hiding to let the heat die down. Tyler came to school but kept his head down, avoiding eye contact, walking like someone who knew they were no longer invincible. Max stopped filming. His phone stayed in his pocket all day, but the consequences rippled out beyond Jake and his crew. Teachers started paying closer attention to the dynamics they had ignored for too long. Mr. Stevens paused mid-lecture, to call out a student whispering something cruel to another kid, something he would have ignored a week ago. Miss Riley sent out a school-wide survey asking students if they'd experienced harassment, followed by quiet invitations to her office. The school counselor's door, usually shut, now stood open. Vice Principal Hayes, a no-nonsense woman, known more for her strict dress code policies than her empathy, requested to meet with Jaden privately. Her office, normally used for scolding and suspensions, became the backdrop for a conversation that felt surprisingly like an acknowledgement. "I've seen the video," she said, fingers steepled on the desk. "So has the district. And the truth is, we failed you." She paused, eyes level. "We failed a lot of students. What you did out there, Jaden, it wasn't just about defending yourself. It exposed something we've ignored for too long. That ends now." She offered him something unexpected, a role, a chance to help design a peer mediation group, to lead conversations about respect, conflict, and what it means to stand up without throwing punches. "You already started the conversation," she said. "Let's make sure it doesn't end with a video." But not all consequences came with meetings and policy changes. Jaden found himself in strange new territory. Some students approached him with wide smiles, trying to latch on to his name now that it meant something. Others kept their distance, unsure of who he was now, unsure if they'd ever really known. The ones who had mocked him the loudest avoided his gaze entirely. But perhaps the most unexpected fallout was Jake's silence. He didn't reach out, didn't send a message, didn't apologize, and Jaden didn't need him to. The apology, he realized, had already come, in the form of absence, in the crumbling of Jake's illusion of dominance. The cafeteria, once a minefield of judgment and ridicule, became a quieter place. No one sat at Jaden's. And yet, even with all the changes, Jaden never bragged, never told the story louder than it needed to be told. He knew what power looked like when it was abused. He knew how easy it would be to flip the script and become what he hated. So he chose differently. He chose to teach. Within a week, a new after-school program launched, self-defense and confidence training, available to everyone. Jaden stood at the front of the modest gym, demonstrating movements not meant to harm, but to protect, to reclaim space, to navigate the world without shrinking. Each session brought in more students, because the fallout of that moment in the parking lot wasn't fear. It was clarity. It was the school realizing that silence could no longer be their shield. And it was Jaden, for the first time since he'd arrived, walking those halls not just as the boy who stood up for himself, but as the one who changed everything. Join us in sharing meaningful stories by hitting like and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with powerful lessons in genuine empathy.